The following program does not necessarily reflect the opinions and viewpoints of the staff and management of this station.
Welcome to the wonderful world of seniors, the best of all worlds. You now have the time, resources, and ability to enjoy what you have worked for all your life. So let's explore the many possibilities available to seniors on Senior World Radio. Senior World Radio is your source for senior citizens-related topics, information, and entertainment. Now, here is your host of Senior World Radio, Glenn Howard.
My guest today is Rabbi Karpov, a lady rabbi. First time I've ever had the opportunity to interview a lady rabbi. In fact, when I hear about a rabbi, my mind tends to go back to Fiddler on the Roof, where the rabbi is an elderly gentleman with a beard and a wise man who has all the answers. So it was quite exciting when I got a chance to interview a lady rabbi. And some interesting stories that I've heard you tell. I just wanted to get a chance to talk to you about it today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's good to have you with me today. Let's begin, first of all, with a little bit about your background. You not only are a rabbi, but also, I think, had a career in teaching. You're a PhD.
Yes,
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh, let's see. Come from a fairly traditional background, more so than most women rabbis. When I first wanted to be one, there weren't any women rabbis then. And I'd grown up in the women's gallery of the, quote, real shul, unquote, the Orthodox synagogue, with my mother, and the men were downstairs. So I'm used to that life and that maybe set of assumptions about the world, some of them. Also, there was some Native American background in my mother's line, and there was a strong emphasis on education. We were taught, you go get an education. That was in one of the first Hebrew stories. I still have it. The story about the fellow who's on the ship with a bunch of merchants, and they're talking about what they're going to sell. So they don't see what the one fellow has, and they ask him, well, he's a teacher. So they laugh at the teacher, and pretty soon pirates board the ship, take all of the possessions, and when everyone gets out on the other end, remember this is a story out of the Talmud, the merchants don't have anything to sell, but the teacher goes on and is an educator, same as always. The title of the story was Tov Torah Mikol Sechorah. Torah is better than all material possessions, and the point was, be an educated person, and then
You've always got a job.
Yes. Well, I've done a stint in the careers industry trying to bridge that gap, but that's another story. But yes, we valued education, and they told me that I would get a doctorate, and that's what I did. Mine's in English with a writing emphasis, but also all of the requirements for literature from the University of Wisconsin. And I started teaching there many years ago.
The idea of being a rabbi, of course, Jewish people I know very committed, and the rabbi is held in very high esteem.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I would wonder, though, about being a lady rabbi. Did you have some friends that suggested that really is no job for a woman, or were you kindly accepted into it?
Well, I first wanted to be after my bat mitzvah, and there weren't any women rabbis then. I really had a sense of calling, and my mother, of blessed memory, who had educated me, taught me to chant Torah and Haftorah when women were not doing that. We had the bat mitzvah so I could do that in my late uncle's temple. She said, oh no, please don't. She'd urged me to get a doctorate, possibly as an MD, but at least a PhD. She said, don't, because the relatives will think I thought it was okay. And there weren't any women rabbis then, but we were advised I should check back every few years, and pretty soon Reform was doing it, but we're really not Reform. I'm certainly not Reform. I learned from all kinds of people. This is not my spiritual path. And pretty soon Conservative was doing it, and that was a little bit closer to what I was, though my own practice was mostly left-wing liberal Orthodox. It still pretty much is. I do the best I can, and that's where my deepest roots are.
Well, I find it so very interesting because although coming from a Protestant background, my mother was one of the early pastors in the Protestant churches out in the panhandle of Texas and western Oklahoma. So I grew up being the son of the preacher's kid.
Yes.
With a mother pastor.
Yes, that must have been exciting for you.
It was indeed. So when I found Lady Rabbi, that certainly perked my attention, and I've really enjoyed the chance we've had to visit with you.
Thank you so
One of the
much.
things that I found very interesting, though, was I understand your family used to teach in Tuskegee University, and you are from the deep south, down Alabama way, are you not?
Oh, we moved all over. My parents were university professors. I remember my father's getting his Ph.D. at the University of Washington. And then we moved, and we moved, and we moved. And my mother got her Ph.D. from Purdue. And we moved around, and at first they thought they'd do business and industry, but they really had a heart for teaching. My father established the physics department at the Catholic University, St. Joseph's College in Rensselaer, Indiana, where they both taught. And then they got jobs at Tuskegee Institute. I was involved, I suppose you could say I'd been involved in the careers industry for years. I'm the one who, at a certain point, typed all of the job-seeking letters for them at the various universities, though my mother was very clear. There were certain places we wouldn't go, and any place that required a photo, she said, they're trying to find out whether the applicant is black, and that we're not going there, because if they don't like blacks, they won't like Jews, and we're not going. That's it.
I understand. As a Jew, of course, a very light-skinned Jew, comparison to blacks living down in Alabama, were you looked at as a novelty, or was there genuine appreciation? Now, this was back in, what, the 70s?
This was the early 70s.
Yeah, okay. What kind of reaction did you get?
Well, the white people who were white supremacists, of course, also don't like Jews and don't consider us white. The first 2 weeks I went to high school. This is in another town where we lived, as opposed to Tuskegee, where they had only just started integrating with busing and things. I got bussed in with all the blacks and my sister and myself and an Italian. In other words, all the blacks plus 3 people who formerly in the U.S. would not have been considered exactly white. This business of considering Jews white in the U.S., it's fairly recent. Mm-hmm. It is fairly recent. You look in Faulkner, there's this reference to it. Anyway, we got bussed in, and for the first 2 weeks there was several young men I went to school with who were white, and they made me to understand every day that I was not white, I was not one of them. Okay, at a certain point, you make a decision. Here I am in the line with my lunch tray. Here are the white kids, the black kids, the white kids, the black kids. I'm not going to try to be, I don't want to be with, picked up my tray, and most of my friends that year as a group were black, though I had individual friends who were white, and it was an interesting year. I want you to understand, my parents didn't set out to have careers in the historically black colleges and universities because they wanted to go do a good deed or help the downtrodden or something. They were looking for jobs for university teaching. They had ruled out any place that was going to be likely stone racists. This is what opened up, and that's where we went. On the other hand, it was, I suppose in retrospect, it was not unexpected. As a child, I knew the map of Africa. We had Basenji.
Well, now, your family is basically, when did they come to the States?
Let's see.
You've got the background of what, Eastern Europe?
Yes, before and around 1900. Before and I knew my father's grandparents of blessed memory, and they had come over, and they were union organizers. They organized the first Jewish bread bakers union in America, and we have people like them to thank that we don't have to work 16-hour weeks because they organized. All right, that's my father's side. My mother's side, there were things going on in the 60s, and what she said about blacks, actually, she said, be nice to those people because they were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt too. Right. Also, when the police started beating black youth and it made the papers, she was holding up the Seattle Times and pointing to the picture, and she was raising her voice. as I am now. This was not nothing. You do not do that to people. All right. And that was the 60s and the early 70s. We happened to end up in this job, I suppose, because we were not ruling it out, and it was a career path. She was well liked. Hey, she was loved.
How did the black students respond to you? Did they see you as one of them, or did they see you coming from Eastern Europe and being a Jew as a part of the white group, or what was their attitude towards you?
They didn't have that sense of history, I don't think. I mean, there were immediacies. George Wallace was governor.
Right.
They had only just recently integrated. I suppose they knew I was not like a white person who was that kind of a racist. At a certain point, there were the kinds of tensions, like a bunch of them wanting to go and protest, and I offered to go with, but they wanted only them, and that makes sense, because if they had changed something on my account, that would not have been empowering them.
Do you think they related to you at all because of the Holocaust, what the Jews had come through, and all of the tragedies in Eastern Europe?
You know, now that you mention it, there wasn't that much to do in this town, and on Saturday, on Shabbat, either we would have to drive over the border into Georgia, or we stayed at home. So if we stayed at home, I would get into my white dress, because that's what I wear on Shabbat, and I would walk across the railroad tracks and visit the family over there. There was a Mrs. H, I'll call her, and at the point where I said I was Jewish, it's like, okay, she understood, that's code for a lot of stuff. And she opened up about a lot of what was going on with some of the police behavior and other civil behavior that was going on. They knew I had a good heart. Some people are going to be prejudiced no matter what you do, and no, they were real friends.
Rabbi, this is so fascinating. We're going to have to take a break in just a moment, but I'm really enjoying hearing the stories about what it would have been like. I lived in Oklahoma City in the late 50s and early 60s when there were a lot of difficulties here.
Yeah.
But I basically tried to stay out of it as much as I could. But to see someone like you, I find that a very fascinating experience. We got to take a break, though. I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio, visiting with Rabbi Karpov. We're coming right back in just a moment, so please don't go away.
You're nobody till somebody loves you.
Have you ever had a problem, but it seemed like there was no one who could help? You spent hours calling around, being referred from one place to the next. Well, not anymore. I want to tell you about a free and easy-to-use service in Oklahoma. 211 is a simple 3-digit phone number to get help or to give help when you don't know where to turn. Dialing 211 only takes a minute, and you are connected with a caring Oklahoman who will help you find the assistance you've been looking for. With access to over 13,000 programs, Heartline 211 can connect you to local resources for many different needs, including health care, food, counseling, rent assistance, disability assistance, job services, and much more. 211 is a service of Heartline, a United Way partner agency. 211, the right first call to get help or give help 24 hours a day.
Hi, my name's Jason Ledlow, president of UT Phone, the ultimate telephone service. We're proud to be a sponsor of Senior World Radio with Glenn Howard. UT Phone is dedicated to providing Oklahomans affordable telephone service all across our great state. We have Lifeline Home Phone service starting at just $1.95. That's right, just $1.95, and most of Oklahoma's seniors qualify for this reduced home phone service. They get to keep their old home phone number, and it even includes long distance. Another great feature of UT Phone's customers really like is that it includes repair service. That's right, any repairs at no additional charge. With many telephone services charging $40 to $50 per month, it makes sense to switch your service to UT Phone. This service is a federal program that is provided through the Universal Service Fund. There is only one per household, so make it UT Phone's home phone service for $1.95. Give us a call at 800-996-0098. Again, call 800-996-0098.
I've made up my mind.
Welcome back to Senior World Radio. I'm Glenn Howard. Today visiting with Rabbi Karpov, a lady rabbi. We were talking in the last session about her experiences living in Tuskegee University down in Alabama, working through a lot of the civil rights issues and being very active in trying to achieve civil rights and I like your comment about as a Jew you relate very much to coming out of slavery. In fact, I think the basic theme of Judaism is we were slaves in Egypt and God brought us out with a strong hand.
That is the master story, and every Shabbat, that is the mantra in many, many, many prayers. You can't forget that. And one of the things it says in the morning prayers, where it praises God, one of the things he does is releases the bound. You see somebody who's having a hard time, you have to help them up.
Interesting.
There were a lot of Jews involved in the civil rights movement who marched in Selma, those freedmen boys who got shot, who got killed by the police. They were Jewish. There was a lot of, especially post-Holocaust, after what happened, this is how a lot of us took out the grief. We can't do anything for our relatives, but if we see something,
you can do something for somebody else.
You can do something for somebody.
Like that. So is that what was responsible for helping you make quite a transition in your life? In fact, getting into doing missions work with the American Indians. You spent some time, I believe, did you not, on a reservation working among the American Indians. How did that come about?
I don't know that I'd call it mission work. I lived in California. Someone invited me to a sweat lodge to pray about Big Mountain. I prayed about that, and I went. As I say, there's this Jewish tradition, especially post-Holocaust, about you see some injustice being done. You can't say nothing. You had to say something. So after that, I got invited to, one thing led to another, and then I met the chapter house president, who invited me after I got through going back east to get rabbinic ordination. Would he please come back to the Navajo reservation and help as an educator? Oh, footnote on that. My mother, of blessed memory, took me to powwow, real traditional powwow, not, now they've got something that's a little more commercial, but this was a real traditional powwow when I was 4. She brought home a book from the library that showed typical faces of each tribe on each page. I wish I could find that book, by the way. And she lingered over Navajo. She said, these people look like us, and we don't know why. She read me things out of the paper. There was some recognition of the Native American Church in the 60s, and she read me about that. I asked if we could go sometime. She said, no, it was probably not. It was different. It was different even from regular Christian churches. She couldn't quite describe it. There was some Native American connection, it turns out, going back about 4 generations. One of my great-grandmothers, may she rest in peace, she came back from St. Louis with this little Native American baby who was hers. They said, where's the husband? She said he got himself killed. He fell off a streetcar. What was his name? Smith. So part of my mother's family is named Smith. There's some kind of connection. Again, there's some kind of affinity. I suspect they came over, and that great-grandmother, may she rest in peace, had very pronounced African features. That's my late aunt's words. And I suspect she came over here, and here are these other people who are also not quite white, but they're not black, and something.
So you're a world mix, every nation Jew, I guess, more so than...
I identify with and keep up with things all over the world.
All over the world.
Jewish people have lived all over the world. You have to keep in touch.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Navajos. How did you get involved with them?
Let me see. I went to the sweat lodge that took me to the next prayer meeting, that took me to another prayer meeting, and then I was sitting up praying with these guys, and the one, there was the guy who was leading the prayers. He was very spiritual, Yazi. His older brother, Yazi, who was in a wheelchair since the Kennedy administration, I could tell that one is very spiritual. That was the chapter house president. Most people don't realize there's a country, effectively, the size of France. In the United States, it's the Navajo Nation, and it is about the size of France. And most people don't quite realize it's there and it's that big.
Now, that's not in New Mexico only, is it?
There's a little in New Mexico.
Okay.
It takes up much of northeast Arizona, which if you look at many maps, you'd think there's nothing there. There aren't many towns, but there are. It takes up just a little bit of, I'm pretty sure it was, I can never remember, was it Colorado or Utah?
Probably so.
Yeah, one of them.
Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado,
Anyway,
that probably the three. So quite a large area.
Oh, quite a large area. So he invited me, would I please come back? I promised him when I got through going back east to get rabbinic ordination, I would come back and help out. And then rabbinic ordination it was a 5-year program. I finished it in 4, and to do so I had to get a pulpit, and I became one of the first 10 woman rabbis to hold a united synagogue pulpit, which is the conservative movement. I held that. Holding it. Getting in was one thing. Very few could, but holding it was another, because there was still so much resistance to a woman rabbi, and I could have had it for a 4th, but okay.
So then you
enough.
were serving in the Navajo Nation?
Nope, I was back east then, but
Okay.
I kept coming back. Got adopted by some of the more traditional people. In fact, the further I went into more traditional areas, maybe with people who didn't speak English and were very traditional, the more we resonated spiritually and the more they wanted me in the prayer meeting. Yeah, it was interesting.
So
anyway,
then your transition into the Navajo Nation.
It took me close to 10 years, and I'd go over there on vacations every chance I could and interview. Pretty soon, the chapter house president, it's divided into 110 chapters. Effectively, he's a mayor. And his mother, who adopted me, a blessed memory, my Navajo mother, a blessed memory, and she didn't speak any English. Took a number of years for that to happen. Passed away. And I went over there for the funeral. I was a puddle. And afterwards, he had me wheel him up the steps of the college, and he said to them, "Would you please hire this woman already? She's been around for a while." So I started teaching there in 97, and I taught there during a time period spanning 97 through 2009. Yeah, I taught more there than any of the other places, which included UCLA Extension, State University of New York, several other colleges and universities.
How was your language in Navajo? Did you do any study?
This is one of the most difficult languages I've ever tackled.
There's the Navajo talkers of the World War.
I loved those guys, and there are very few left, very few. But I'd meet their relatives, and I'd burst into tears and say, "Would you please thank them for my life, for all of us Jewish people, thank them for our lives. Without them, I don't know that we would be having this pleasant conversation."
Tell me a little bit about your work with the Navajos. So you did also a lot of social work, did you not, with?
Not really. There was a lot of exchange of ideas and a spiritual connection. I got adopted by a number of the more traditional families, and sometimes they wanted me, especially when there was some kind of problem, they wanted me in the prayer meeting. Please pray for so-and-so, and off I'd go, sit up all night, pray with them. And these are meetings where they, by the way, basically did not want, quote, white, unquote, unquote, white people. They didn't want white people. They got it that I was not white, I was Jewish. And a lot of the grandfathers had apparently gone off to World War II and come back, and they didn't want to talk about it. The one son with whom I spoke kind of teased it out of his father, who didn't want to talk about it, and he said things like, he'd never seen anything like it in his life. He said they butchered them like sheep. Anyway, that the kids knew about the Holocaust from the 3rd grade on. I guess that was a point of commonality. And one of them, she was kind of older students, she said, "Why are you not like other Anglos?" Because I knew what some of the questions were about certain ceremonies. if you do something and it gets you into a state of ritual impurity, don't you need to do the other part to get yourself out, etc.? Some of the customs were so similar, you could barely tell them apart. I showed the traditional Orthodox book explaining some of these customs, especially around death. With a couple of exceptions, you could barely tell them apart.
Rabbi, we've only got about a minute left. This has been so fascinating. I would have loved to do another show with you sometime and really talk about the whole Middle East situation, about Israel, the restoration of Israel in 48, and particularly the experiences that Israel's having right now with the attacks literally coming from all directions. In fact, some of the things even some of the European countries are doing right now in opposition to it, as well as the rise of anti-Semitism. Are you experiencing any anti-Jewish comments real briefly since being dressed as a rabbi? People quickly recognize who you are. Is that becoming a problem for you now here?
Not so much. In fact, when Rabbi got shot, the Christians in that town, they were so wonderful. They kept walking up to me on the street and saying, "I am so sorry for your loss." No, in general, no, that's not quite how it works. What I get is, I get the burden of how to beef up security in the last 20 years since these things started happening, and at the same time not freak out the congregants. For example, after that Seattle bombing, I was doing the Jewish Center of Indian Country at the time. There was this whole wide patch between Albuquerque, which had rabbis, and Flagstaff, which had one who kept coming in and out, and then down in Phoenix there were a bunch, but I had this wide spot in the road in the middle, and off I went to the meeting in Albuquerque with Homeland Security and the police and everybody else, how to beef up security around Jewish institutions and individuals, and they had that all over the country.
Unfortunately, Rabbi, that's got to be a topic for another day. I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio. We've been visiting today with Rabbi Karpov, a very interesting lady with a lot of very interesting experiences. She's teaching right now up in Langston University. In fact,
I'm an assistant professor of English at Langston, and I'm very grateful to be here.
I had the privilege of driving up to the university and getting a chance to interview her. Anyway, we got to go. We'll see you this same time next week. Until then, be good to everybody you know, especially to yourself. We'll see you next week, this same time. Bye-bye now.
I'm on the top of the world, looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find is the love that I've found ever since you've been around.